At the moment, the scenario that exists is that there is a handful of private rhino owners that happen to be in a very strong position financially, and therefore have established a body which they claim represents the views of all private rhino owners in South Africa, and are pushing strongly for legalized trade. However, many private rhino owners, especially ones with smaller herds, aren't in favor of trade. In South Africa, private rhino ownership, as with most other wildlife species, is not all that uncommon. It's very similar to what you would have in a country like the States, where you have big ranches devoted to animals specific to that country. So on a property like this is our way to contribute to conservation efforts in South Africa. So a part of the motivation of opening this reserve to the public, as opposed to just keeping it as a family-owned reserve and having it just to ourselves, was rooted in that belief that for future generations especially, to have any kind of affinity for wildlife and any kind of passion for protecting it, they need to be able to engage with wildlife. And this reserve, as many others, are geared towards doing exactly that, giving kids from disadvantaged areas in townships or shanty towns exposure to wildlife that they would never otherwise have had. My first priority is to keep animals alive. We have less than 20,000 white rhinos left in this country, and this is the last surviving population in the world. In about 2009 and 2010, we became aware of the fact that poaching was on the rise, but I think it's very much one of those situations where you think it's going to happen to someone else. It's not going to happen to you. An animal I'd literally known since I was in grade school was found by our staff early one morning, dead by the side of the road, completely mutilated, along with her 2-year-old calf. And we found later during the autopsy that she was heavily pregnant at the time. So effectively we lost 3 rhinos in a single poaching incident. When you are forced to see firsthand what that animal must have experienced in the moments before they died, and how humans can inflict such cruelty on these gentle, majestic creatures, was just beyond me. And I'll never forget, my dad just went and locked himself in his office for that whole day. That really propelled me to want to do something about the problem. I think we went through a thought process that possibly many rhino owners contemplate. And yes, one of the first thoughts we had was, well, maybe we should just cut off the horns, and then there's no incentive for poachers to want to kill this animal in the first place. But there were so many drawbacks to this process. You can't actually dehorn an animal safely flush with the skin. You have to leave about 10 to 15 centimeters of the horn at its base so that you don't damage the growth node. And poachers often kill animals just for that amount of rhino horn. It's sold on the black market per kilo. But increasingly my mind started to center more and more around measures that would be proactive, so they would prevent our animals from dying in the first place, and secondly, methods that would allow the animal to keep its horn the way we believe they should be left. And that kind of eliminated measures like microchips and DNA sampling. By law, we have to do that during every procedure anyway, but those are reactive measures. My thoughts started to go into a direction where, what if we could contaminate the horns of our rhinos to such a point where, and publicize this message to such a point where it would make no sense for any poacher to come anywhere near this animal. Not only would it potentially be a health risk to them, but also they wouldn't be able to sell this horn on to the next person in the illegal supply chain. And that really, in very broad strokes, is how Rhino Rescue Project was born, or was conceptualized. In terms of anti-poaching, what we soon realized as we entered the fray for the first time in 2010 was that there is no silver bullet solution. There is no cure-all that's going to work universally across properties. There is not a single tactic that you can use that's going to work in both small private reserves and as well as in the national parks. However, on reserves where we had worked, the results were remarkable. More than 98% of treated rhinos are still alive and have not been poached. And if you consider that the national average is roughly 4 to 5% in terms of losses, and that we're losing 3 to 4 rhinos in the Kruger National Park per day alone, those results are a triumph by any standard. However, the only drawback that horn devaluation procedures has in terms of being a poaching deterrent is that it's not being implemented on a large enough scale yet. We need to reach a critical mass of animals. We need to treat a sufficient number of animals for poachers to really look at South Africa as a whole and decide that this country's animals are off limits.